Hey everyone, Sycra here, and today I'm doing a speed painting on the iPad. Now, normally I don't paint on the iPad, and the reason is, when I first got my iPad, I thought maybe I could paint with it, and I bought a Wacom bamboo stylus. It's not the fancy new one they have. I know they have like this new really expensive fancy pants one. It was just a regular Wacom bamboo stylus, and it felt nice, but it just was not a good experience painting on the iPad, and that's why I have this program, Sketchbook Pro, on the iPad. And so the good folks over at the Friendly Swede, which is a company, they sent me some free styluses that they had, and who am I to turn down free stuff? So of course I tried it out, and there was one stylus that I actually liked quite a bit. It's called the Micro Knit Hybrid Fiber Tip Capacitive Stylus, which it's a fancy long name. But anyway, so the reason I like this stylus is because the other styluses, they all have this like rubberized or rubbery tip, and that's fine. But I found I prefer a smoother surface, and maybe that's just me and my preference. But this micro knit thing, it gave like a smoother feel, so that was good. And yeah, I mean, it's still painting on the iPad, so it's still really difficult. But or I found it really difficult. But it was a better experience. One thing I didn't like though is, and this is probably just the flip side of having a smooth thing, is that sometimes, not always, maybe once every few minutes, it would make like a squeaky sound. When you have glass and you rub something against glass, it makes a squeaky sound. Yeah, and I mean, that's really not a big deal, but I'm just trying to see like, well, what wasn't so good about it, and that's about it. And then it was like I looked on the site and it's $7 something for two. And my Wacom bamboo stylus was, I think it was over $10 for one. So anyway, just if you want a stylus for the iPad, and I don't know if you would use it for painting or just for using as a stylus, but yeah, I would recommend the Friendly Swede products. And that's just not even because they sent me free stuff. Well, yeah, it is, because I mean, I wouldn't have tried it otherwise, but I mean, it's a decent product. Anyway, so onto the thing. You may notice there's a big iPad on the screen, and that's because I'm using an app called Reflector. And I wasn't actually aware of this because I don't really use Sketchbook Pro, but or for the iPad anyway. And I was going to save my things, and I noticed there was a record video function. I'm like, oh, I wish I knew about that earlier, because I ended up buying this app called Reflector, and basically it just shows your iPad on the screen. And I'll include links to Reflector and the Friendly Swede stylus thing that I was talking about in the description of this video. But yeah, so the Reflector app is pretty cool, because you can, I'm just using Camtasia to record my computer screen, and it's showing whatever is on the iPad. And there's not even too much lag, so it's pretty good. It did make it so the audio cut out on my iPad, and then it feeds it to the computer, which I did not like, because I like listening to it on the headphones. But anyway, and the other thing it does is it's sort of, I don't know if it's stretched or squished, but it makes the image more vertical than it really is. And at the end of this thing, I'll show the final image, and you'll notice it's a bit wider than this image, and that's just because of the Reflector thing made it a bit squished. But anyway, onto the painting itself. Again, I'm using that technique where I just go by intuition, I guess. Painting something that is not really planned, and making a mess and making sense of that mess after the fact. And something I used to do early on is I would put strokes down, put brush marks down, and then I would adjust them and fix them. And what I'm trying to do more now is not fix them. So I'll put stuff down, and then I'll just put other stuff in other areas and just keep building and try and work with what I've got instead of trying to fix it all the time. And the logic, if there is any behind that, or the rationale behind that, is that maybe there is a part of me that knows what it's doing, and so all that stuff was there for a reason, and so maybe it's not such a good idea to tamper with things. But with that said, of course, I did make adjustments all over the place. Like, definitely the side of the face for this girl was a bit difficult. And I did find out pretty early on that I was doing a girl's face. I made the splatter things for no reason. I don't know. And then I made like a greenish blob in the middle, and well, it's similar to the background color. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'll turn that into a face. And yeah, went from there. I added the orange because it felt like I needed some color. And so there's that. And yeah, maybe I can talk a bit about skin tones and maybe not tones as in color, because clearly this person is not human colored. But it still has the same value principles, and that is, if you notice in the light side, and this is something that took me a long time to learn, but the light side of the face, and if you're wondering what's a light side and what's a shadow side, just squint your eyes and you'll notice that as your eyelashes go down, it's easier to block areas of the face. So like one side of her face clearly is in shadow, under her neck is in shadow, and then the rest is all the light side. But in the light side, there are plane changes, and there's value changes to indicate the plane changes. And this is very important. It's not just... because what I used to do is I used to think of it more like a sphere, and we're always taught, or I heard a lot anyway, that you should treat the head like an egg, which makes sense. But the problem with that is that you end up with way too many smooth gradients from light to dark. And with the face itself, yeah, there's smooth gradients all over the place, but there's also defined planes. And it's better, I feel, to block out the defined planes. For instance, maybe this part of the cheek is facing towards us. This part of the cheek is facing to the side. This part of the cheek is facing down. Well, those are all defined planes. Now, the problem with faces, especially girls' faces and children's faces, because they're softer, right? The transitions are more smooth and soft. The problem with them is that the value transitions between like the part that's facing a bit to the side and the part that's facing a bit to the front, and I'm talking about in the light side, so forget the shadow side right now, just in the light side, those value transitions are so subtle. They're so subtle. It's very difficult to get them right, because sometimes it's not even one value step difference, it's like a quarter value step difference. So I'm not sure if this is making any sense, but my point is, pay a lot of attention and don't just, put down smooth gradients. Try and think, okay, especially when you look at a photo, if you look really carefully, you can actually see these planes where it's like, oh, it's not just like a gradient from light to dark. You'll notice that actually there's like a patch of this one value, and that's because it's indicating a certain plane. But then you also get the gradients, but I think of the gradients after the fact. And I also try and think of the face as separated into light side and shadow side. And in this particular painting, it's pretty low contrast on the face. So there's not a huge difference between light and shadow side. But if you use photos a lot, you might notice a big difference between the light side and the shadow side. What I used to do is I would look at photos, and then I would use the eyedropper tool to look at how dark the shadow was and how light the light was. And it was crazy how dark the darks would be. And it just didn't seem right, because when I would put the same colors beside each other, it felt like there's way too much contrast here. But in the photo, it didn't look that way. And the trick to that is just to make it so your light sides is separate from your dark side. And in the light side, don't go completely to the brightest bright. Do like a medium light, and this is called the midtone. That's all it is. and then you have your shadow. The stuff in the shadow is not the darkest dark, and so you separate those two first. And then usually what I would do is on the border I get a bit darker, where the terminator is. And if you've seen my Foundations of Light and Shadow series, you will know what that means. And if not, maybe you should try and look at that series. And I know people want me to finish it, but honestly, it's been so long, I don't even remember what my intention was of where I was going to go with it. So I don't know. I don't know if I can finish it. But anyway, okay, so yeah, you have your lights and your shadows separate, and then go darker in the shadows and lighter in the lights. So once you got the two established, you don't want to go darker in the shadows and then lighter in the lights. You just go darker in the shadows. And then that lets you get that contrast, because now you have many steps to the dark. So you can get any light area and any dark area and make a nice transition, and it'll work as long as you have enough in-between steps, and those in-between steps are in logical order. So by that I mean it goes light, darker, 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 dark. What I sometimes see in beginners' work, and this creates a very messy look, is when they go light, darker, lighter, darker, darker, lighter, dark, dark. Like there's like those muddy in-between transitions. No, you want it consistent. So yeah. And then something else that was good with using the iPad is because it's so difficult, and because it's like so cumbersome to change color or change opacity or change brush. And here I'm experimenting with a few different brushes, but I wouldn't say like, oh, what brush did you use to get that? Because it's like, I don't know. I'm just screwing around. You would have as much luck just randomly picking stuff, because that's really what I'm doing. But anyway, something else that I noticed is just this cool thing that I wasn't doing before, which is just to block in big areas with a soft brush and low opacity of light. And I did that with like the orange on the face. I just took a bunch of orange and I put it in the background, but I let it bleed over the face, and I don't know, maybe it's something everyone else knows how to do and has been doing forever, but it's something I didn't do before. And anyway, hope that helped. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.